evening. Thank you for tuning in to the Injustice Anywhere radio program. My name is Bruce Fisher. I'm the Executive Director of Injustice Anywhere. We are an all-volunteer organization working to correct wrongful convictions. We have now developed a network of websites all working to bring more attention to wrongful convictions. You can view our main website at injustice-anywhere.org. You can also Google Injustice Anywhere, and you should see our main website right there at the top of the page. We currently have 8 featured cases. Those cases are detailed on our homepage. When visiting, you will find links to Facebook and Twitter. Please like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter in order to keep up to date with current events. Tonight, we will be discussing the Russ Faria case in Missouri with Mary Anderson and Michael Corbin. Mary is Russ Faria's cousin and is a family spokesperson. Michael is one of 4 friends of Russ that was shockingly implicated by the prosecution in this case. We will be taking calls in the final segment of the show. Please call in with any comments or questions you might have. The number here is 347-850-1478. That's 347-850-1478. We also encourage our listeners to post questions on our Injustice Anywhere Facebook group page. Sarah will be there as well to participate in that discussion. Just search for Injustice Anywhere on Facebook and you should have no problems finding our group page. Russ Faria was convicted in 2013 of murdering his wife Betsy in 2011. Faria was convicted despite the fact that he had a rock-solid alibi. 4 witnesses testified that Faria was with them watching movies at the time of the murder. Gas station security cameras and a fast food receipt also confirm his whereabouts on the evening of the murder. Faria's case has received national attention. Many have been left to wonder how Faria was convicted based on the evidence of this case. We will try to answer that question and many others tonight. There is also unreleased information about this case that will be revealed tonight. We will get to that information later in the show, but first we'll give an overview of the case, so please stay tuned. I would now like to introduce our guest to the show. Hi, Mary. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Bruce. Thanks for having us on.
Hello, Mike. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Bruce. Thank you.
I'm happy to have you both here. Now, as I said in the beginning here in the intro, I'd like to give a brief overview of this case for those that are just tuning in tonight for the first time to learn about the case. Now, Mary, as a member of the family, were you aware of any marital problems between Russ and Betsy?
Not at the time of her death, no.
Okay. They were getting along well at that time?
Yes, they had just got back from a cruise.
Okay. And how long had they been married?
Almost 10 years.
Did they have any children together?
No, she had 2 daughters, but he raised them. The youngest was 3 years old when he stepped into their life.
Okay, so he had taken over the role there. He had helped to raise them.
Yes.
Now, before the time of the murder, what did Russ do for a living? Did he work regular daytime hours?
He did. He worked for Enterprise. He was an IT guy, and he did work from home.
Okay, so he worked from home.
Yes.
Now, on the day of the murder, was just an ordinary day for Russ? He was working at home. His wife, Betsy, was not home at the time during the day. Were they home together during that day?
Not during that day. She had chemo that day.
Okay, and he was not the one to take her to her treatment?
Not that particular day, he was not. Her mother had a friend named Bobby in town who was taking her, and she wanted to spend some time with her.
And now this was a Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay, now Russ and some friends would meet up routinely on Tuesday nights. Is that the case?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, Michael, you were one of those friends that met up on Tuesdays with Russ. Can you tell us a little bit about those nights?
Yeah, that was our game night. We'd get together once a week to play a variety of different games that we have. We've got some card games, some board games, a couple of role-playing games that will get broken out occasionally if everybody's available. But we've been doing it for, I guess, 3 to 4 years at that point.
Okay, and it was just a Tuesday night thing. It was a get-together.
Yeah, and the only thing that made that night different was one of our number had to work because of the holiday schedule. He had to work a job. So instead of playing games, I just decided that I'd put in some movies before everybody got over it.
Oh, okay, because there was usually 6 people in the group then instead of 5.
That is correct. We have a normal guy that just wasn't able to be there that night.
Okay. How long have you known Russ?
I've known him for about 20 years, maybe a little more than 20, 21 at this point.
Okay, so you're a longtime friend.
Yeah. In fact, I would say there was one guy there that night who had known Russ for less than a year. Everybody else had known him for years.
What was the time frame of your get-together? How long did you guys usually gather?
Oh, we still do. The rest of us still do, and it's a 6 to 9.
6 to 9. Now, how far away, was it at your home?
Yes, it was.
And how far away do you live from Russ's home?
About 30 miles, maybe a little more than. I really can't tell you for sure because I don't know for sure where Russell lived. I know he lived north of Troy, I believe, or west of Troy, but I was never been to his house. In fact, nobody that was here that night at my house has ever been to Russ's house.
Okay, so he always visited your home or one of the other friends' houses.
Yeah, he used to live out in this area, and so, we'd known each other for a while, and he'd just come out here, much easier than getting everybody to go out to his place or anything like that.
Sure. About what time did Russ head home? Was it a normal night? Did you guys break it up around 9?
Yeah, it broke up around 9. I can't tell you for sure because I didn't look at a clock, but I know that Russ must have had his eye on the clock because right around normal time, I would guess, he took off, and then within 1 or 2 minutes, Brandon and Marshall, two of the other people that were here, they ended up taking off as well. They both roommate together.
Now, news reports I read, it said that Russ did not head straight home. He stopped to get food. Is that correct?
From what I know, yes. He stopped at an Arby's, and the only one I can think of he would have stopped at would have been the one that's about 2 miles from my house.
So it was an ordinary day for Russ. He was home during the day, and then he went to his get-together at night. So he heads home.
Correct.
He heads home to find a horrible scene. His wife has been brutally murdered in their home. Mary, what did Russ do when he discovered his wife's body?
He called 911 immediately. Now, he thought that it was suicide because Betsy had threatened it before. And people need to keep in mind that she had a black T-shirt on, so at that point you couldn't see how many stab wounds she had. So what he seen was her wrists were slashed and a knife in her neck.
Now, I've listened to this 911 recording, and from what I've read throughout this case is there was criticism that he had a lack of emotion. Now, for me, when I heard that call at a moment where he should have been emotional after seeing such a horrific scene, he sounded very emotional to me. Can you describe that phone call?
It was a very emotional phone call. It's very hard to listen to. There are times you can't understand what he's saying. And she would have to calm him down enough to answer, and then he would just bust up crying again. Now, I've known him my entire life, obviously, and I've never seen him in that state.
He seems like a very calm, demeanored person. When I was watching the tapes of his questioning, he seems just a very calm man. Is that his general demeanor?
It is.
So for him to be in the state of mind he was on that phone call, it sounded like he was in shock. That seemed genuine to me on the call.
Absolutely.
So it really made me question how they even questioned his emotions after listening to that call.
The 911 operator that actually took the call, we've had the opportunity to talk to. Right after taking the call, she had to take an hour-and-a-half break to call her mom to calm her down because he was so upset.
It was, just a horrible scene he came upon.
Right.
Now, you had mentioned that he thought it was a suicide. Now, according to the documentation, his wife Betsy was stabbed approximately 55 times. Like you said, she had threatened suicide before. Was it just his immediate feeling that it could be suicide, or did he see slashes on her wrist?
Her wrists were slashed. And so
which
that's
were probably, looking back
that,
in hindsight, they were probably defense wounds.
Well, one of her wrists was cut almost all the way through.
Just a brutal attack.
So they were very brutal.
I believe many of those cuts were post-mortem.
That's why there wasn't a huge, substantial amount of blood, is because so many of them were post-mortem.
Were investigators able to estimate a time of death?
Well, the funny thing is that one time it was out there that her time of death was 7:37, I believe, but then when it came time to getting the death certificate, we have no time of death.
So what was the initial time of death that they estimated?
7/37.
But the official death certificate has no time of death.
Correct. And they immediately removed it. We had found it it was all over the news, and that was reported on one of the news sites, and it was immediately taken down.
Now, with Mike and his friends, it's clear that Russ's whereabouts were accounted for during that time.
Yeah, I mean, he was here.
Now, if possible, I'd like to go through the events of Betsy's day leading up to her murder. I don't know how much of that has been documented. You had said that she went for her chemotherapy treatment. Were her activities for the rest of that day, were they well documented?
She had chemo, and then she went back to her mom's house to play some games, and originally was going to wait for Russ to pick her up, but another lady showed up to pick her up.
Now,
what
this
makes
lady,
it interesting, Pam Hupp.
Pam Hupp, she showed up at Betsy's mother's house to pick her up?
Well, she showed up twice. Let me kind of lay this out. This is something that the police would never talk to me about, so this was never put out there. The day before, we celebrated Christmas at Russ's mom's house. This Pam kept texting Betsy's oldest daughter, Leah. Now, I don't know if it was Leah's phone or Betsy's phone, but she was texting Leah wanting to know about taking Betsy to chemo. And this went on for a good hour. So Leah kept telling her mom, Pam really wants to take you to chemo. She kept specifying, Bobby's taking me. I don't need her. So I asked her, I thought it was her sister, Pam. I said, well, why is she so insistent on taking you? And she says, that's not my sister. So Pam knows that Betsy has a ride, and she's not needed. They go to chemo. Pam shows up at chemo. Betsy sent her away because she had a ride. She then shows up at Betsy's mom's house, insisting to take her home. So at that point, Betsy got a hold of Russ and told him, I don't need you to pick me up.
Now, was this documented by Betsy's mother?
I don't know if she's documented it, but I have tried to tell the police from the get-go. Of course, I told Russ's attorney, Joel Schwartz, from the very beginning. So it was well known that this started the night before.
Okay,
She's also
but how do we know that Pam showed up twice at chemo and also at her mother's house?
I could be incorrect, but I believe in questioning, Bobby had stated that she showed up twice.
Okay.
In the deposition, yes.
So there is a witness that has provided testimony that this did occur.
Correct.
And it was Pam Hupp that eventually took Betsy home that day?
Yes.
And when they arrived home, was Russ at home at the time?
No, he was not.
He had already left to go to game night?
Correct. Stated, and it's been documented, it was stated that they got to the house around 7 o'clock.
So, discounting the murderer, Pam Hupp is the last person to see her alive.
That is correct.
Now, was Pam a known friend of Betsy's, or was she a new person in her life?
Pam stated that they had known each other for 10 years, but nobody had met Pam, I think, until like a week before this happened. So she never did it. She never interacted with anybody else. When they went on cruises or Betsy went to Branson quite a bit, Pam was never around. So no one really knew who Pam Hupp was. This was a new name to all of us.
What is Russ's recollection of Pam?
They only met once. So he doesn't know a whole lot about her.
Pam's a 10-year friend of his wife, Betsy, and they only met once.
That is correct.
Now let's talk about the life insurance, because obviously this is a key point in the case. Shortly before the murder, the beneficiary of Betsy's life insurance was changed from Russ to Pam. What was the explanation for this?
We don't have one. Pam has changed her story several times. First, she said it was because Betsy didn't trust Russ or her family to manage her money and take care of her girls. And then it came out that, no, the money was just meant for me, per Pam.
Did Betsy discuss this with anybody else in her life?
No, she didn't. And everybody that talked to Betsy, when she was asked, how do you feel, do you have your things together, she said she was comfortable because she knew Russ and the girls were taken care of.
So she never discussed this with her mother, that I'm changing the life insurance. She never mentioned it to anybody.
Or her sisters.
Or her sisters.
Correct.
And Russ was completely unaware that this life insurance policy had changed?
Completely unaware. As a matter of fact, it was Russ's sister and I that found the beneficiary form. It wasn't Lincoln County, and it wasn't the case squad. We found it in between the nightstand and the bed on the floor. So how they missed that, we don't know.
And you're the one that found it?
Russ's sister and I were in there cleaning the house.
Did Pam Hupp cooperate with investigators? Was she ever a suspect early on? Did she have an alibi?
Never a person of interest, and she had no alibi.
She was never looked at by the police as a suspect, even though she had dropped Betsy off at home that evening?
Correct. She was now the new beneficiary, dropped Betsy off at home, the last to see her alive. She's changed her story about 5 different times. She was the only one speaking out to the media and made a huge scene at the funeral home.
Immediately after the murder, she began speaking to the police, correct? And she provided a lot of negative information about Russ, isn't that correct?
That is correct.
And they immediately just bought everything she said, hook, line, and sinker, from the first time they met?
Everything.
What information did she provide about Russ?
She just talked about their marriage, said they had problems. She talked about Betsy wanting to leave him. She tried to say that Russ put a pillow over Betsy's head at one time and said this is what it feels like to die.
Is any of this information documented by anybody else in Betsy's life?
No, it is not.
So she claimed that she was just her best friend and she kept all of her secrets safe with Pam.
Correct.
Okay. Now let's look at the evidence of the case as presented by investigators on the night of the murder. Of course, he's the husband, so he's going to be an immediate suspect. We know that to be true. But was there any evidence at all at the scene linking Russ to the attack? Was there blood on his clothes, evidence on the murder weapon? Was there anything to immediately assume that Russ was the killer?
No, he had no blood on his clothes. He still had the same clothes on that showed up in the videotapes. There was no. They were able to prove that a shower had not been taken, and there was no blood in the drains.
Now, what videotape are you referring to?
Like at Quick Trip and the other gas stations, the ones that he walked into when he was pumping his gas.
This is on his way to
video.
Mike's house.
Correct.
Hours before the murder occurred, he's on video at 2 different gas stations wearing the same exact clothes as he was wearing the night that he called 911. Why did he go to 2 gas stations?
He stopped. I think cigarettes were cheaper at one place, and then he decided to stop and pick up something to drink.
And it's a 30-mile trip, approximately. We didn't pinpoint it, but it's a decent trip. So at one point he could have stopped and got his cigarettes at his regular place, and then he decided he wanted something to drink. So that's not anything out of the ordinary. I just was curious why there was 2 gas stations in one trip.
No, that was why.
Now, I have to ask the same questions that I asked for Russ. Let's put that to Pam. Was there any evidence at all linking her to the murder? Did she have any suspicious clothing, anything at all that would have led anybody to think that she was the killer?
It took her a couple days. After a couple days, she turned in her clothes and said this is what she had on. We have no proof of what she really had on.
So they didn't really investigate her properly?
No, they did not.
Now, there was a pair of slippers that belonged to Russ that did have blood on them that were found in a closet. What do we know about those?
First off, if somebody was so cautious to not make a mess and to clean their mess, would they really take blood on their slippers and put it in the closet where the blood was showing? That was the biggest thing. That was, a question. You could tell it wasn't a drop of blood. It was like it was smeared into the blood, and he never kept his slippers in the closet. They always sat next to his chair.
Was that photo that's available online showing the slippers upside down in the closet, was that the actual first photo that was taken before those were moved? Is that how they were first seen in the closet?
Yes.
So that's a police photograph that's available online. I believe it's on your website as well. That's the first view of the slippers that the police obtained.
Yes.
Now, if you're looking at this from a standpoint of thinking that a person has been framed, these post-mortem stab wounds to the victim, as well as these slippers that are completely out of place, would certainly lead somebody to believe that, because you would want to make the scene look like it was a vindictive murder, and you would also obviously want to implicate the person that you were trying to frame. But it takes an awful lot to try to prove that somebody was framed. You don't need to find the actual killer to prove somebody's innocent. There's no evidence at all that I've seen linking Russ to this crime at all. But I really don't think that you need to find the killer to determine that.
Correct.
Is there any possibility that neither Russ or Pam had anything to do with this murder?
I would find it very hard to believe. She changed her story so many times. She stated that when she left, Betsy was laying on the couch. Then she stated another day that when she left, and her words were, "Oh, it makes sense today that she was standing at the door waving to me." Then she proceeded to say, "Well, it all happened so fast." But the detectives didn't keep pushing, and they never found out what she meant, it happened so fast. And that can be seen, that clip is from the police interviewing her, and that showed on Dateline.
Her story changed. I watched it. Her story changed multiple times. It's just amazing to me that they didn't look at her at least as a suspect on the first night.
That was my
she should have been an equal.
Why didn't they even just look at her as a person of interest?
Right. She should have been looked at the same way Russ was looked at, because she was the last person to see her. Now, has she stayed active speaking out about this case, or has she gone silent?
Every once in a while she comes out, and she will actually go head-to-head and fight with Mike. She won't say anything to me.
Is this just on social media?
It's all on social media.
So she hasn't changed her story one bit. Did she get the life insurance payout?
She did. Russ was arrested January 4th, and she got the money in February. They never questioned it. They just automatically released the money to her. And he wasn't convicted at that point. It
was immediate because she was the beneficiary. Has Betsy's children seen any of this money?
No. As a matter of fact, there was a trial yesterday between the girls and Pam Hupp. And when we got to court, Pam decided she was going to fire all of her attorneys, request a new judge so that they can get a continuance.
Now, what position have Betsy's children taken on the case?
They're an interesting girls. They were close to him, but when it came time to the trial, they blamed him for it. An hour after Russ was arrested, they went, along with their Aunt Julie, and took $10,000 out of his bank account. But they did not have authorization to do.
So this was right after the trial. So at this time, currently, they believe he was involved in the murder?
Yes.
Are they on Pam's side here, or are they angry with her that they haven't seen any of this life insurance money?
They're mad at her because they haven't seen any of their life insurance policy.
But that hasn't made them suspicious about the case in general?
They say no.
Now, we get to the time of the trial. How long did Russ sit in jail waiting from the time he was arrested till the time the trial started?
Almost 2 years. Trial was November of last year. He got arrested January of 2012, and trial was just last November.
Okay. And you were able to attend the trial?
Yes.
Now, Mike, you were actually a witness at the trial, so you were unable to attend the actual trial, correct?
Correct.
Now, tell me a little bit about how the trial proceeded. How long was your questioning during the time of the trial?
I was the first one to be brought out in front of the court. And I don't know, I'd estimate I was out there maybe 45 minutes or an hour. It really was kind of surreal to me and quite shocking. Once I got up on the stand, I literally froze for about 30 seconds just because I'm not a public speaker.
Which is a normal situation. You were thrown into this whole thing. You never expected in your life to find yourself in this situation. Now, did all four of the friends testify?
Yes, all four of us. And from what I understand, we all said pretty much the same thing.
Now, what was the cross-examination like?
The cross-examination kind of was when I started to feel like, boy, they're attacking me. Why are they attacking me? I couldn't understand it because all of the alibi witnesses, all we wanted to do this entire time was just get the truth out. I mean, we'd been told from the beginning, from the first interrogation, because, believe me, they picked us all up and interrogated us. From the first interrogation, they had been told they had incontrovertible evidence, that it was open and shut, this, that, and the other, so we didn't know what to think. Now, we didn't think that Russell necessarily did it, but we just wanted the truth to come out. And unbelievably shocked when we heard during the closing arguments that she had said we were conspirators to murder.
Which is just crazy. Now, you being a friend, you'd been his friend for 20 years, but when you heard initially that this murder occurred, I mean, did it cross your mind that maybe he went home and this happened before you saw any of the evidence or the time of death? Did you have your doubts initially?
None of us really were doubtful of Russ, but we weren't sure what happened. You know, I mean, we've always, and we even had this discussion that, you know, I guess it's possible that somebody can snap for some reason, but we just couldn't see it. I mean, all of us even remember, my living room isn't that big. We were all within 8 foot of each other that night. Okay. And we all remember looking over at one point, and Russell was dozing off. So we pretty much had figured, okay, well, if it happened, it must have happened before he came over to our house. And it wasn't until trial that we figured out, well, it couldn't have happened before he came over because his wife had been seen at a time after which point he'd been at my house.
Sure, she hadn't been dropped off at home yet. She was still at her mother's house.
Right.
So at that point you knew my friend is innocent.
Yeah. In fact, after our testimony, when we were sitting in the wings, kind of outside, there was another witness for the defense that was in there telling us things that we had never heard before. And it was like an epiphany. And all of us realized right then, there is no way Russell could have done this.
Now, this closing arguments, the prosecutor stands up and comes up with a mass conspiracy between you and your 4 friends, or your 3 other friends, with Russ. They think you all got together and pre-planned this murder. How did that all go down during the closing arguments?
You know, I never was there to hear the closing arguments. I've read them. I've got a copy of the transcript.
Right, you have the transcript.
And they're horrible. I mean, I can't believe that they would say these things about us. Absolutely nothing is supported by any evidence. And aside from that, none of us are criminals, nor do we have a criminal record. We're all pretty laid-back, nonviolent people.
And you've never been charged with any crime.
They would have been arrested. Correct. They would have been arrested if they really believed it. And Leah Askey, the prosecutor, will not state any of that outside of the courtroom because she knows if she states it outside of open court, she can be sued for that.
Right. She can say, unfortunately, in this country, a prosecutor can stand up in open court and say just about anything they want.
Correct.
But if they're under oath or if they're outside of the courtroom, it's a whole different story. So she has made no comments publicly about this at all.
No, she will not. And she said they planned it for years, and it was going to happen on that night.
Now, we haven't really gotten into Betsy's illness, but she was terminally ill at this time, correct?
Correct, stage 4 liver cancer. She was a breast cancer survivor, but then they found it had gone to her liver.
So what was their reasoning if she was going to pass away anyway? Why would a husband risk spending life in prison when he knows his wife is going to pass away anyway? What was the prosecution's reasoning on that?
Well, she changed it twice. She said it was a crime of passion, and then it became murder 1, where he planned it out for like 4 years. Her story's never, she changed. It was the weirdest thing. I've been in courtrooms before. I used to be a paralegal, so I had been in courtrooms before.
Okay.
I've never seen a closing argument go from it's this type of crime to turn around and twist and be something totally else, different. It was like she was just making up the story as she went along.
But she never provided any explanation at all why a husband would want to kill a terminally ill spouse.
All she said is it was greed, and that was it.
How could it be greed?
This is a man that couldn't even talk about, right, he didn't get the insurance. But this is a man that couldn't even talk about his wife dying without getting upset.
Now, did the prosecutor make note that Russ had found out that the life insurance policy had changed?
She never really addressed it. Well, they wouldn't address it in front of a jury, but they tried to say he found this paper on the counter, which was not true. Like I stated, his sister and I found it after he was already arrested, and we were going through the house packing things up. We found it on the floor in between the nightstand and the bed. He knew nothing. The police actually ended up telling him while he was in jail without his attorney present, which was...
The reason I ask is because you can't argue greed at the same time as you're saying that he acted out of anger because he was no longer the beneficiary. Those two things don't work.
Exactly. Either does murder one and a crime of passion. They're two different things. Crime of passion is not premeditated.
Now, Mike, how did you hear the closing arguments? I'm sure they were broadcast on the news, but you did not have the full transcript. So were all four of you together when you heard this shocking news? I mean, this must have just hit you in the face.
We were actually all separate, and me and my girlfriend was here that night. We actually were watching the news when we had heard that Russell had been convicted, and the news reporter said that the prosecuting attorney had claimed that we were part of the conspiracy.
And you're sitting there watching the news, realizing the prosecutor just accused you of a crime.
Yes, and immediately I'm calling Russell's lawyer to find out what the hell happened.
Okay. Did you ever think of getting an attorney to protect yourself on this, or did you get advice from Russ's attorney?
I got advice from multiple other attorneys, and every attorney that I had talked to told me, well, Mike, they're likely not going to do anything to you because you're innocent and there's no evidence.
Has anyone from the prosecution's office ever made any attempt to contact you after the trial to suggest that you may be brought up on charges?
No.
None whatsoever. It's just been ignored. Her closing arguments were for the jury and nobody else.
Yes.
So you're accused of conspiring to cover up a murder, and you've never been charged with any crime whatsoever. What was the storyline that she devised about the role-playing games? What was this that she discussed in closing arguments about?
She had intimated to the court and the jury throughout the trial, apparently, that our role-playing games were actually live-action role-play, like, these medieval shows where we get dressed up. We've never done anything like that. We sit at a table, we've got a board, we've got pieces, we've got dice, and we've got lots of paper. It's essentially a very complicated game of Monopoly more than anything else.
Okay.
And they had suggested that, I guess from a transition to this game that we decided we would murder somebody. It really makes no sense to me, and it defies all logic. I've been playing games.
It's ludicrous to me.
I mean,
looking at it from the outside, reading what I've read, it's amazing to me that this was bought by a jury. We do have a couple calls on hold, so I'd like to go to those now. We have a 941 area code. Do you have a question or comment?
Hi, this is Joanne Rowe, and I'm an advocate for Russ Faria.
Welcome to the show.
And
Hi, Joanne.
Hi there. I do have a comment or a question. It's my understanding that the cell towers were tracking Pam Hupp there at the house the night of the murder, at the time of the murder.
Correct. That is correct. She made a phone call. She made two calls. One, she called her husband, and then the second call was to Betsy, stating that she made it home. She says, I'm home. I'm home clear. Well, through the records that Joel was able to get, it shows it pinged off the tower that was in their neighborhood. She did not live that close. She lived probably a good 30 minutes away from them. So there was no way she was home. And this does happen to be about the approximate time of death.
So she pinged a cell tower close to Russ's home, Russ and Betsy's home, near the time of the murder.
Correct.
And this was discovered during trial, after trial? Is this something that was discovered by investigators after the conviction?
No, Joel did bring this to the trial. However, the jury was not allowed to hear this.
Is this evidence that was suppressed from the jury?
Yes.
Okay, we were going to get to that, but we might as well talk about it now. What is the reasoning for the judge to hold back this information?
She would not let his attorney discuss anything that would make or point to somebody else doing this crime. Anything that would point that way. She said that she was not on the stand for that reason.
she's not a suspect, you can't try to accuse her of a crime in the courtroom.
Correct. So therefore, the deal about the insurance policy could not be read in front of the jury. The pings off the cell phone was not read.
So none of the insurance information was heard by the jury.
Correct.
The fact that the insurance policy had changed beneficiaries was not heard by the jury.
It changed 4 days prior. Correct. They did
not. Now, a couple jurors
have
come forward since then and publicly spoken out about this, haven't they?
Yes, they have.
Stating that things might have went differently at trial if they knew this information.
Correct, because in the beginning it was a 6-6 split, and their words were that they filled in the blanks and they assumed this is what happened.
It's amazing to me that you don't have to accuse Pam Hupp of a crime to tell the jury that the beneficiary of the victim's life insurance policy changed hands 4 days before the murder.
Right.
That's just an error by the judge, in my opinion. Well, thank you very much for the call. That's important information.
My pleasure.
We have another call here on hold. It is a 636 area code. Do you have a question or comment?
Hi, I'm Pam Drake. I am Russell's aunt. And I'm calling
welcome
because...
to the show.
Thank you. Russ and Betsy really loved each other. I host Christmas Eve at my home every year. And Betsy and Russ were here, and we play this game, and this game that we play, my downstairs is finished, my basement, and we always play it down here because we have more room. And a lot of our guests that come, they smoke, and they smoke out in the garage. Well, we were waiting for everybody to come in, and then finally we sent somebody out to go get them. They came in. Betsy took up a big portion of the sofa, and then she scooted over, and she said, "Here, babe, I saved you a spot." He nudged down, and he's smiling, and he says, "I feel privileged," and they kissed, and then, the rest of the night we all played the game and did whatever. And the Wednesday before the Christmas Eve, Russ came over to our home like 15 minutes before my husband, my 7-year-old granddaughter, and myself were getting ready to leave to go look at Christmas lights. And when he got here, we asked him to go with us, and he proceeded to talk about Betsy, and he got all teary-eyed because he is a Christian, and he's believing for total healing for his wife. And he had said, "Aunt Pam, there's a friend of Betsy," he said, and she told Betsy, because she's a nurse, so she put everything in a medical term, so I understand where this woman's coming from, told Betsy to get everything in order because she doesn't have long. And Russell started crying, and so we prayed together. And then, I forgot, I lost my train of thought, but he had cried about that. And then on Christmas Eve, she had said to me, she had asked me who all was coming to our home. And then I didn't mention a certain person that used to come over, and she had asked, she said, "Oh, why isn't she coming over and her family?" And she goes, "She didn't come over last year either." Well, it's not working out with her coming over, and I said, so we just didn't invite her anymore, and so on and so forth, because we're not talking. And she said to me, "Well, I have a person in my life. I don't know how to get the person out of my life. I'm not strong enough." And it was like, oh, okay. And then now after all this, it's like, wow, who could that person have been? But they did love each other. They got along really well. He was railroaded, and he was framed, and this just isn't right. And the money that was taken from his account, the $10,000, it wasn't taken after the trial. It was taken right after he was arrested by Lincoln County. And I had church people coming over here that went to church with Russ and Betsy, and they had told me that this was in the very beginning, they told me that law enforcers were going to Betsy's family's house convincing them that Russ did it, because in the beginning they did not believe it. And they were told this by another church member who stayed connected with them, and so did we. They're the ones that backed out and then started blaming Russ, which was a shock, that we were told that they were being convinced by the law enforcement that Russ did it.
Right. Unfortunately, people are influenced by media, and if the media is portraying Russ as guilty, you will find that to happen. People are seriously influenced by what they see on the news. whether that's negative or positive. It's just a fact. And we see it a lot in wrongful convictions that people don't look at the case, the big picture. They take little sound bites and they do turn on people. It's sad to see, but it does happen.
It is sad.
Well, I want to thank you for the call.
And thank you for doing this
your
show.
family's going through so much with this case. Wrongful convictions, we say it all the time, wrongful convictions create additional victims, and Russ's family have all become additional victims in this case, which is very sad to see.
And I can't imagine what he's going through, being held in a maximum security prison.
Stay strong, and there's a lot of people fighting for him, so hopefully this has a good outcome.
Thank you.
We have quite a few calls on the line here, so I'm going to go to the next call, but thank you again for calling.
Thank you.
We have a 425 area code. You're on the air. Do you have a question or comment?
Yes, this is Lori. I'm calling from Washington State, and first of all, I just want to say how sorry I am for his family. This just must be devastating for everybody. I do want to comment a little bit more about the confusion regarding why the insurance money wasn't brought up in court. I did a little research into it because I also work on some wrongful convictions in a different state, and so I wanted to compare this case with what I was working on. So I actually wrote to Lincoln County and asked them for the documents relating to this hearing that denied this insurance money to be brought up in court. And I got the documents, but they didn't really clarify the argument. There was one where the motion saying why it should be left out, but I couldn't find any document that contradicted that. So I called and asked for the audio from that hearing, and they gave me instructions to get it. I sent it in as instructed. Just surprisingly, I got a call back about a week later, and they said, oh, they had made a mistake. Now they didn't have an audio of that hearing. So there's still more to be found out about this. Looking at the way that they denied it, they can deny circumstantial evidence if there is no direct evidence. But in this case, as you pointed out, she was the last person to see Betsy alive. So there is direct evidence connecting her to the crime. So it's still really a mystery how the judge could have ruled that this evidence couldn't be allowed. But that's just a little bit more background about how this type of emotion is really very common. And in wrongful convictions, it's often used to exclude the true suspect. So,
right. Well, like you said, her being the last person to see Betsy alive, she certainly should have been, as Mary said, at least a person of interest.
Right. I would like anybody that knows more about this to talk about the time of death. To me, this just seems so simple. The body was found shortly after death. Why couldn't the medical examiner find when she died? Did they take body temperature? Sure, that's my question. If anybody else has any information, I'd sure like to know more about it.
Well, thank you very much for the call.
Thank you.
And the excellent information.
Okay.
We have another call coming here at the 618 area code. Do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, this is Russ's Aunt Debbie, but my question was to Mary, and somehow she got off the line. But I wanted her to let the listeners know how the cops treated her and Rachel right after this crime happened, because they went over to the house to clean out the house, and they had wiped everything down. And then they sealed off the house before they got in. Well, after they cleaned off the house and everything, they resealed it for the second time. How can you reclose off the house the second time when everybody's been in that house, including Betsy's family that went there and cleaned out that house? They took everything out of that house. And then they're going to come back and reseal that house off, and then slippers are found? Really?
Right. You can't seal a crime scene that's been trampled by so many people.
Exactly, and they did it the second time. And see, Mary and the rest of some of my family members were there cleaning the house. So, they knew what the house looked like. And then they wiped stuff down. But then they're saying that. So, but I'm hoping Mary calls back and she can answer that.
Mike, are you still on the line?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you have any idea how long after the investigation that those slippers were discovered?
I really don't know. I've tried to get a clarification on this. I do believe that they were discovered before the house was gone through the second time. But what happened the second time, from what I understand with my conversations with Mary, is that they came back in the second time, claimed that they found some evidence, and that was the evidence that they arrested Russell on. Now, this evidence that they claimed they found never came into court.
What evidence never came to court?
Well, the evidence that they claimed they arrested him on.
So they didn't mention the slippers were not part of that evidence?
No. The slippers, I believe, were found before the house was gone back into the second time. And from what I understand, Mary has told me that they claimed that they pulled some kind of a floor tile or a drawer that had evidence on it, but neither of those things came up in court.
Okay. And these slippers were in a place where he never left his slippers.
Right. That's my understanding.
Very interesting. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the call.
Thank you.
Bruce, this is Mary. The slippers were found the first night.
Okay.
They were found the first night. And, yes, they came in and they took the cabinet doors and the drawers and part of the tile, and they said that's what they arrested him on. However, we had already been in there cleaning them. I myself had touched every single cabinet in that kitchen. On top of that, once they did all the testing, no blood showed up on any of the items.
Nothing at all. There was no cleanup or anything done in the house?
No.
So the murder was committed. The murderer left the scene. There was no cleanup, no staging of any kind other than possibly these slippers.
Because they were able to prove no shower was taken, no blood was in the drains. They took all the drains out of the house. So there was no cleanup of blood.
Now, let's go back to these slippers for a moment, because I mentioned it to the last caller, but these slippers were found in a closet where he never kept his slippers, correct?
That is correct. He always kept them next to his chair.
And, of course, we're only basing this on what Russ explained on where he kept his slippers, but he claims he never kept them in that closet.
Betsy's
his daughter confirmed this.
Yes, she did. She confirmed that his slippers, the first thing she said is, my dad never put his slippers in the closet. They always sat by his chair.
So there was confirmation on that then. If you look at the slippers, did it look like they were walked in with the blood? Or
no.
How was that blood? Where was the blood on the slipper itself?
It was on like the top and the side of the shoe. It was like it was dipped in and rubbed.
And there's no slipper footprints, shoe prints anywhere in the house?
No, there was not. And I was the first one to walk in the house once it was released. So I was able to verify there was no blood anywhere.
So there's no evidence anywhere in the house to say that anybody was wearing those slippers. They were just found in the closet with blood on the top and side.
Correct.
I just wanted to get that information about the slippers because obviously it's a key point. They were his slippers.
There is something I want to bring up since we were talking about the trial. We have since been notified by somebody anonymously, but an inside source.
Okay, this is the unreleased information I mentioned at the beginning of the show, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
let's get to it. One of the main detectives, Michael Lang, who also was a witness on the stand, sent this email to Leah Askey, the prosecutor. They were having an affair. Once I found out, I asked the attorney, Joel Schwartz, if this was ever disclosed to the court, because obviously it had to be disclosed since he was a witness on the stand. And Joel said no, it was the first he heard of it, and he was not very happy about it.
He was a prosecution's witness?
Yes.
And what did he testify regarding?
They just asked him some of the questions about the investigation and about the arrest.
But he was a prosecution's witness that testified at trial against Russ.
Correct.
And you're stating that he had an affair with the prosecutor.
Correct.
At the time of the trial?
He, at the time of the arrest, he states in there that he would do anything for her. Michael actually has it in front of him, the email.
Okay, so Michael obtained the email from an anonymous source. This person just started sending this information?
Correct. And we were able to verify that this was a true email, came from a true email address. So we're not just throwing it out there without checking our sources first.
Now, Mike, how did you verify this email?
Well, number one, when I get anything in the mail, or it would be the same as if somebody emailed it to me, I'd have a hard time believing anything. Now, I can't say that this is exactly 100%. I can't say that this is real, but I can say that I have no reason to disbelieve it. And I did, just earlier today, talk at length with someone who was very close to Miss Askey for years, who was the prosecutor. And this person verified the existence of the email that I have, as well as the contents of it. This person has apparently seen the email as well. And according to this person, it was common knowledge inside of the Lincoln County justice system that Detective Lang and prosecuting attorney Askey were having an inappropriate relationship.
And what was Detective Lang's, what was his full name?
Michael Lang.
Michael Lang.
He now no longer works for Lincoln County.
Is there any explanation for that?
From what we've been told, it was because of the affair.
He was fired or he transferred?
Yeah, I've got a piece of mail that was sent to me that kind of refers to it from the same anonymous source. This is word for word. I'm reading the email at this point. Actually, this one was a sent mail. It is common knowledge that the prosecuting attorney, Leah Womack Askey, was having an extramarital affair with Michael Lang of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department during the time of the investigation. Special considerations were given to him as a result of this relationship. Lang was put on the stand to testify during the trial. I would assume he perjured himself to protect the affair and the relationship with the prosecuting attorney. I've since heard that because of this inappropriate relationship, which I will read again, here we go. Another piece of email. This email, anonymous, I just got in the other day. Neither of them, this would be Lang or Askey, are aware that this email is in circulation. The Attorney General's office has no knowledge of it, nor does anyone within the 45th Circuit's judicial realms. Granted, it is known that the affair took place and that her office, specifically her secretary, acted as a conduit to purport the relationship. The former and current sheriff knew of the relationship. His name is Sheriff John Cottle, and he is a friend of Detective Lang. The former sheriff, Mike Crickbaum, removed Detective Lang from his position within the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department due to the mounting conflict resulting from the intimate relationship between Detective Lang and prosecuting attorney Askey, as it was creating an environment of dissension and controversy. Eyewitnesses spotted P.A. Askey's vehicle at Detective Lang's home in Lake St. Louis multiple times, and it goes on from there. And I have the email as well. That was purportedly sent between Lang and Askey, and it's long. It's a couple of pages. It's horrible. I can provide a copy of it to you after the show if you like.
Now, first off, has Russ's attorney been made aware of this information?
He has.
Yes,
I had contacted him. Right. We both contacted him, and I asked Joel if, this was disclosed to the courts, and Joel said it wasn't, and he wasn't very happy about it.
And that they're comfortable with this information being released to the public?
Yes. Joel is aware of the fact that I was going to bring it up.
It just adds a little bit more insanity to the case. It's
we also
pretty
had
shocking.
A juror. There was a juror that was one of the jurors who was related to the judge. She was an ex-cousin or something. They're all on Facebook together. They're all friends.
How was that juror allowed to be part of the jury? Looking at this affair, did this witness have any testimony? Did he provide testimony at trial that was really damning to Russ? Was his testimony crucial in this case?
It was, because he was the investigator on the case.
Was he the lead investigator?
Yes, he was Officer McCarrick's boss. So yes, he was. He was also
he was the lead investigator of the crime scene.
Well, I know of Lincoln County side. I don't know if he served on the crime scene, the actual crime scene.
He's a key player.
The major case squad.
He's huge. Right, major case squad. That's what I was trying to think. I don't know if he was on that, but he was Lincoln County. He was also one of the arresting officers when they came to arrest Russ. He was one there.
So this will surely be brought up on appeal.
Absolutely.
How's Russ holding up through all this? I'm sure he's been made aware of this information as well. How is he hanging in there as this whole thing plays out?
He's hanging in there. I think what helps him and keeps his spirits up is he knows how many followers we have for him. He knows we have people around the world that are backing him and fighting for him. That has helped him tremendously. Because in the beginning,
Mike, have you been able to keep in touch with Russ?
Yeah, I've visited him probably 5 times. He's doing well. He's not the same guy that he was, but who would be, you know?
Right. Now, how far away are you from the prison where he is being housed, both of you?
About 2 hours.
Okay, so it's not too far away that you can't visit.
Somebody's there every weekend.
That's good to hear. What was his sentence?
He got life plus 30 with no parole.
With no possibility of parole.
It sounds to me that this is a rock-solid appeal, but the problem being is appeals in this country, it's a whole other show to discuss, but the appeal system, in my opinion, is broken. It's incredibly difficult to appeal a case in this country. And I was shocked to read in a few news reports, I don't know if either one of you want to touch base on it, that a couple of the jurors actually stated publicly that they felt comfort in their decision because they knew there was going to be an appeal. Do you have any information on that?
They stated it to Chris Hayes and they stated it to the newspaper.
Because that thought process
okay with it.
is so misguided. Because the current situation in this country, it takes years and years and sometimes decades for an appeal system to run its course. And jurors should be made aware of that because that is just a horrible error in judgment to think, well, even if I'm not completely certain, they're going to appeal anyway, so everything will be fine.
Right. They're not the ones sitting in jail. They're not the one at home at night, the family members who haven't slept in almost 3 years. They're not the one having to put out thousands and thousands of dollars.
Is Russ's legal team, are they currently putting together his appeal?
Yes, they are.
Okay, and there's no time frame set for that at this time?
No, we don't have a date yet.
Where can people go to learn more about this case? I know you've set up a website. Can you give the URL for that site?
Mike, you want to give your URL?
Yeah, there's a freerussfaria.us, which is the website. However, probably the best place to go to network with others of his supporters would be Free Russ Faria on Facebook. That's where most of his supporters tend to congregate and talk amongst themselves.
Okay, so just search Free Russ Faria on Facebook and you can find it. That's Faria. It's very easy to find. That's probably the best place to go. The website also contains quite a bit of information. I would recommend heading there. Injustice Anywhere has endorsed this case, so his case is now seen on our website as well on the endorsed cases, and we hope to write a few articles on this case and try to help bring more attention to it. With the information you've provided tonight, on top of what I already knew, I'm just sitting here dumbfounded, as I'm sure you've been doing now for many months.
Almost 3 years.
Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't discussed about the case?
I think I have some notes aside. I just want to make sure we did get everything.
I'll tell you what. I would probably end this by saying, at least my portion, by saying that, before all this, I was really naive about how the criminal justice system worked. I had no idea that the criminal justice system isn't really there to figure out what really happened. They're just there to sate people's desire to put somebody away for a crime. And that's pretty apparent in this case. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that Russ could not have committed this crime. However, they were able to pin it on him anyway. And so flagrant were they in their attitudes that they decided that they would throw his alibis under the bus as well. It's stunning, and I think everybody should be made aware that law enforcement is not necessarily your friend.
I can easily see your position.
When we got disconnected, you were asking about the body temperature and all of that. They never took a core body temperature on her, and rigor mortis was starting to set in, that when they picked up her hand, her whole arm moved. Their answer to that was because the front door was open and it was cold outside. Anybody that knows anything about rigor mortis knows that by that cold air coming in, that would slow down the process of rigor mortis. Because she had already been gone a couple hours by the time he got there.
Right. It seems to me that the prosecution was very concerned about his alibi, because if they weren't concerned about it, they wouldn't have come up with a crazy story in their closing arguments. So it seems very clear to me that they saw that he had an alibi. If they didn't think his alibi was strong, they wouldn't have come up with those crazy allegations and closing arguments implicating 4 friends and never charging them with the crime. To me, that shows that they felt like they had to throw that in.
Right, and they're going to make it hard for people. People aren't going to want to step up anymore. You know, you're going to be an alibi for something, but you're not going to want to step up because you're not protected. And now you're going to be accused of this crime. And that's not
Mike,
fair.
I know you stand up. Mike, I know you stand up to discuss this case. Are the other 3 friends, have they been vocal about this as well? I know I saw them on TV, but is anybody fearful about speaking out?
No. We live in a much less corrupt county. The county we live in, St. Charles County, is a much more upstanding county. I trust my law enforcement here. I'm not afraid for anything. I won't enter Lincoln County anymore, but that's on the advice of just as many lawyers that told me I didn't have to worry about anything unless I entered Lincoln County. So we just
you are being
won't
cautious.
go into Lincoln County. What's that?
You are being cautious. I mean, you do have a reason to believe that there's a conspiracy against you in this county.
Well, if I went to Lincoln County, I really do think I'd be taking my life in my own hands. I mean, you'd have to be a local to understand the true depth of the corruption in Lincoln County. I mean, not too long ago, there were 2 kids that were pulled over, and they executed them, shot them in the back of the head, because they claimed the kids were going to back over them. Unfortunately, the kids were just putting the car in park, and it went through reverse, and they claimed that's the evidence they used to execute those 2 kids. So, I mean,
so it's safer for you just to stay out of that county.
Yeah, it is. And I won't go there at all anymore. So.
Okay. Do you both have time? Because another call just came in. I'd like to take it if you have time.
Sure, absolutely.
It's a 636 area code. Do you have a question or comment?
I have a comment. I am Russ's Aunt Pam again, Drake.
Okay.
But anyway, the reason I'm calling in now is because Russ, he was railroaded and framed by Lincoln County and by everybody else that lied about him. The jurors, they filled in the blanks and went on their own theory, and that's how they came up with the guilty verdict. And then when the family went to get Russell's belongings, Lincoln County is trying to say they lost Russell's clothes. The suit that he wore.
This was the day he was actually transferred from Lincoln County to prison.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was the same day. So we went there in a timely manner. We were there the same day he was transferred from Lincoln County to the prison.
The police claimed that his clothing was lost?
All his suits that he wore to trial, his undershirts, all the clothes were gone. We never got any. We were never able to get anything back.
And there was no justification for that either.
Mm-mm.
No, and his mother continuously called up there trying to get Russell's belongings back, his clothing. Nothing.
Wow. Well, thank you for that additional information. Everything we hear seems to be extremely negative towards all involved on the prosecution side of this case. I hate to sound so biased, but there's not a lot of positive information that I see coming from them whatsoever.
Yeah, you can't get much positive when they won't talk about it.
Right. Well, I don't blame her for not talking about it because, like I said, she can stand up during closing arguments and tell a lie, but she can't do that out in public or on the stand under oath.
Right.
We do know that Leah Askey, the prosecutor, had stated to somebody from the media that winning this case was the worst thing that ever happened to her.
She said that winning the case was the worst thing that ever happened to her?
Yes, she did.
Did she ever elaborate on that?
I'm assuming it's from the backlash that they received. Because they were bombarded.
Well, it's going to continue.
Not just from us. It was from all the advocates that once they seen Dateline and they seen Chris Hayes' links, so many people stepped forward. And I have to say that I've always watched these shows, but I was never one to think, I'm going to reach out and I'm going to call.
Right.
Now with what we've gone through, it's opened my eyes, and I'm so thankful, and he is thankful for everybody that has stepped forward. But it could happen to your family.
Absolutely. I don't think the prosecutor is going to be very happy that an affair is going to be made public as it was tonight. I mean, that's certainly another negative. So if she thinks that this was already, bad luck for her, it's just going to get worse. She handled this case completely improperly, and anything that comes down on her is all due to her own doing.
The judge had several writs against her. I believe she's had now 4 cases that were overturned just this year.
From this prosecutor?
This was the judge, and the prosecutor was the same in a couple of them. I cannot verify that it was the same prosecutor for all 4 cases. But Judge Chris Kunza-Minnemeyer is the judge that has had 4 cases turned over on her.
Well, now I'd like to say I'd really like to thank both of you for being here tonight. I really think you provided a lot of great information. I hope more people take interest in this case, because this is a rock-solid case of wrongful conviction. There is just absolutely nothing to put any doubt in my mind whatsoever that Russ is innocent. And you both presented the case very well, and I hope you both continue to speak out the way you are. I know you're both working very hard on Russ's behalf, and you're doing great work, so keep it up.
We will, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to share this story, to get it out there to the media.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
we will post an
Bruce.
article regarding this show tonight on our website, wrongfulconvictionnews.com, and I'm inclined to write an article on this case as well, which I'll probably put on Digital Journal, because this is just one of these cases that just stopped me in my tracks. I just learned about it recently.
They lived it. If they didn't live it, I mean, I don't know if I would believe it if somebody just told me about it without having to look at everything, because it's unbelievable. Not one shred of evidence against him. 4 strong alibi.
I think most people are feeling that way.
Prison.
So everybody tonight, if you can take some time, go to Free Russ Faria on Facebook, and you can collect more information there and really dive into this case to learn, all the details. And I know that transcripts are available on the website as well. So thank you both,
we have Dateline
and have a good
on there,
night.
and we have Chris Hayes. Thank you, Bruce.
Please check our main website, injustice-anywhere.org, for information on our future radio shows. This show, as well as all of our past shows, are going to be available on our radio archive at any time you want to listen. It's right there on the home page. So thank you for tuning in. Have a good night.